Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the AIScento Podcast, where we explore AI, digital transformation, leadership, innovation, and the future of work. If you're enjoying these conversations, please like and subscribe and share so we continue bringing you insights from leaders who are shaping the future. Today, we're discussing a topic that doesn't always get enough attention in AI conversations, the human side of transformation. Our guest is Dr. Carley Corrado, founder and CEO of Enliven Leadership. Carley is a PhD scientist who transitioned from chemistry and renewable energy research into helping organizations unlock their collective intelligence, create results, cultures where people can thrive, innovate, and perform at their highest levels without burning out. Through her Enliven method, she helps teams to create a flow state, cultures that combine high performance with psychological safety, creativity, and purpose. Carley, welcome to the AIScento Podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, John.
So let's start with talking about a bit from being a scientist to a leadership transformer. You have a fascinating background. Many people know leadership coaches who come from HR, organizational development, but you come from chemistry, physics, and renewable energy research. Can you tell us about that journey? How did you move from scientific research into leadership transformation?
Yeah, I think that I've always been really passionate about renewable energy and innovation and just solving the issues of the world through science and building new possibilities. And what I came across, especially when I was part of a startup company and shifted more from being in the lab, we spun a startup out of my physics postdoctoral research. And I was getting to be representing this technology and in a lot of spaces with brilliant people, and the industry was stressed to say it plainly, in this innovative spaces that I was there because I'm really here for earth and here for innovation, and it felt like the heart would get missed and everyone's deeper purpose and connection to the why is sometimes an afterthought when you're hustling, and it's normal. We have to respond to survival threat first. And so essentially, I just got to experience this over and over. And when I started doing transformational leadership and being in spaces where I was around a lot of inspired people that were getting so connected to the mission and so filled with inspiration and overflowing with the pathway forward from these deeper states of connection to why they were here, to what was possible, I just saw this huge gap. And I said, we're functioning from just a small percentage of our potential if we're always in vigilance mode, if we're tired, if we're stressed, we're not going to solve the issues. We're going to be kind of operating at a lower level. And that's what inspired me to create Enliven Leadership, so that we could get enlivened and actually function from a state in which innovation is naturally what happens, rather than this grind, because the solution can only come from the state of consciousness which we create them from, as Einstein famously spoke. So that's what I'm here to uplift the vibe so that people create more innovation.
Okay. And was there a particular moment that triggered that transition for you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I would say when I was part of the startup and we were at this moment where everyone was working super hard, and it just felt like we weren't sure where we were going, honestly. Like, like, are we looking for someone to buy the company? Are we wanting to grow? It just was this moment where there was a lot of dispersed attention. And I think we had this greater vision of the technology being successful, but there wasn't a lot of clarity and coherence on the executive team. And it was this moment where I just felt this recognition that being really together, like, this is what we're working toward, this is what it's going to feel like that really crystal clear vision, which is one of the things I've discovered that often is missing, is a level of vision and clarity that feels amazing in your body. Like, which is funny to say, often the body's not part of the conversation, but we don't want to just think about things abstractly or just be too focused on just numbers or some external definition of success, but we want to feel it. And like, what is this going to feel like to all of us? Like, what is this going to look like? What are the relationships with our partners, with our clients, all of these things? So I experienced this huge gap that was frustrating. And that actually catapulted me into a total career change and this level of motivation that I want everyone to have access to, like a brilliant life and actually feeling really good as we create the things that we're here to create. And part of the process is not just seeing what's possible in the future, like we really get crystal clear about the future, but then how do we create that right now in our lived experience and the agreements in the team, in our collective cohesion? And that's really the juice to make it happen.
And what did science teach you about systems to influences your work today?
Mm. Well, science helps to get really clear on, what are the parameters of the solution, all those things. I would say that in the work I do now, while I'm bringing all of this embodiment and this connection and meaning, I always stay connected to desired outcomes and the specifics, the metrics, like that. You can't leave those out. And so I believe that weaving together both that strategic thought and exactly what we want to create and actually crunching the numbers and being clear on the pathway that's going to make that possible. And then that is typically present. Well, not always. Sometimes it's a little bit chaotic of like the crystallized strategy and the metrics and all of those things. But then I bring in the other part, which is the meaning, the connection to purpose, the agreements of the team that allow us to work together to reach these goals.
And do you see organizations as living systems, similar to ecosystems or scientific systems?
Yeah, definitely ecosystems. Here we are, living beings. We are part of the earth, and that is one of the viewpoints that I bring and one of the lived experiences. Because if we see ourselves as separate, which is what can happen if we're just in the mind, it's like we're this floating head. And then what about the needs of our body? That's part of what living in this vigilance place where we're stressed in a way where these fear response patterning, which we don't even notice, they become the air that we breathe. We just are contracted in our bodies, and then we are this floating mind. And so when we take up our whole vessel and noticing how we're feeling, noticing the state of our entire being, we actually start to connect to the ecosystem. We start to notice relational dynamics. We start to notice human dynamics, like just things of, have you eaten? Do you need something for your physical body? Like that can really hinder the intelligence of the entire team if we're not connected into our bodies, this is a living ecosystem here. And then it allows us to connect to the team and the greater ecosystem of the whole world when we're present. And what that unlocks is a huge amount of information. And I don't think this gets emphasized enough of if your teammate is sharing a plan and there's an agitation in your body and you're feeling stress, shortness of breath, you're starting to have all of these anxiety signals, that just being able to presence that and say it out loud to the team and recognize and have the team respect, like, actually, this is a form of information. Now you can say, okay, there's something missing in this plan. And we can say, oh, we haven't thought about this other piece, or this part is going to take much longer. And if we create that timeline, we're going to be stressed and scrambling and we're not going to meet it and we're all going to be screwed. Like when we have the presence to actually include our bodies and use the flow state practices so that we're more fully present rather than only our floating minds, which are disconnected from the system, the whole of the planet, we actually gain access to much more information that allows us to make better decisions and save the team so much time. And it's amazing what I get to see as we shift our cultural dynamics and create more space for open communication, because everyone functions differently. So it's not about everyone needing to become super embodied or people needing to change their innate system, but there are certain resources on the team. There are certain people who are naturally more connected in these ways. And when everyone has space to share their voice, to space to speak up in these moments, then the whole team becomes much smarter.
One thing I find interesting is that both science and AI are fundamentally about understanding systems, and you spend a lot of your time helping organizations understand perhaps the most complex system of all, which is people. Let's transition to talking about flow state leadership a little bit now. So you talk frequently about flow state leadership, and many people are familiar with the concept of individual flow. What does flow look like at a team or organizational level?
Yeah, I think I just started to give you a glimpse of that, which is empowering everyone on the team to share their voice. That's actually a big part of creating a really open, psychologically safe environment where we can start to move toward flow as a team, is making space for everyone. It's inclusivity, which, if in some of Google's studies about psychological safety, what you learn is that if there are few voices, if you are in a group and there's only a couple experts that ever get heard, that group has a lower collective intelligence and a lower psychological safety than a group in which everyone's voice is welcomed. And so we start to create flow state. First, it's just to create the shared agreements that welcome everyone's voice, that welcome everyone's humanity and everyone's intelligence. Sometimes it's some of the, lower level positions, you might say, that are more connected directly to the customer or connected directly to partners, and people who are in, higher positions are actually more disconnected from certain aspects of the whole, that there's a huge amount of intelligence that becomes unlocked if you open the conditions for those people to speak up. So that's just part of it, is unlocking the brilliance of the team so that everyone is contributing while we occupy different positions, different decision-making capacities. We want to create the space so that everyone has a voice, everyone has a seat at the table, because the team becomes smarter that way. And then we can start to build simple practices that help to shift the collective state of the team. So if we jump right into a meeting and we're just talking about, okay, deadlines, this and that, that there's a missed opportunity to have a moment of kindness on the team that actually helps everyone's nervous system to calm down, everyone to get more regulated. If you do something like some kind of an acknowledgement, you can do a gratitude wave where each person receives acknowledgement, where people celebrate each other, celebrate wins. Like, there are different, really simple techniques that don't take much time. And you could say that they regulate the collective nervous system of the team so that we can start to have these conditions where we are working together in this stronger way. And whenever someone is not able to speak up, then they're going to engage less. They're going to give less of their expertise, less of the knowledge that they have access to. And so as tension over time, that these things that are unspoken create this lowering of the engagement and this lowering of the collective intelligence. And so as I work with teams, we're actively training on, well, first, there's a lot of work on getting clear on what we're here to create together and the culture that's most supportive. Like, there is no one size fits all. If you want a team that is really nurturing to the clients and creating a certain level of customer experience versus wanting a team that's rapid iteration where it's risk positive, where you want to have people celebrate, failures, actually talk about radical things that they tried that didn't work so that everyone can celebrate them, so that you have a culture where people want to try things. So it's really about that clarity, taking a lot of time to get clarity as an executive team first. And then how do we create the conditions for this flow state, which is, like I mentioned, a huge part is having the open communication so that everyone gets to contribute and have fun together. That's a big part of it too.
What are the signs that a team is operating in flow?
Okay, the signs that a team is operating in flow. So people aren't afraid to share what's real. That's one of the signs of a team that operates in flow, is that there's actually more constructive disagreements. Like people aren't, rather than there being more moments of silence where it's almost like this loaded silence where things aren't being spoken, there's this way that people are presencing things and they feel comfortable to do so. There's really psychological safety. If you were to ask people a set of questions about how comfortable they feel to ask a question, for example, or how comfortable they feel to share something personal, not every team is going to look the same. So there's different types of environments, but overall, there's this sense of everyone gets to be here. And lightheartedness and laughter tends to go a long way also, no matter what type of team. Though, again, sometimes different groups have different ways of sharing or signs that they're comfortable. But essentially, if you were to check in with the team and see, like, do you feel like you're making steady progress toward the mission? Like, there's this sense of, like, we're dealing with things, like, versus some teams that I start to work with, it's like, we just talk and nothing ever gets done. Or there's this feeling of, it's like each person is stressed in their own bodies and the whole team is in this era of stress. Versus as you start to open up into this flow state of the team, there's this sense of momentum that naturally, like, we're moving forward with things, even if it's discovering what doesn't work. Like, there's the steady momentum, and the problems that happened a month ago aren't the same problems that we're talking about today. Like, we have a whole new set of issues that we're working through, and we're flowing together. We're making moves.
And how does psychological safety contribute to flow?
So, as I mentioned, when people aren't able to share, you could think of them like these little eddy currents. If we use the analogy of flow as a river that's moving forward, sometimes, especially a kayaker will tell you these little eddies that will, like, all of a sudden you're going the wrong way in the river. And there's these little places, like these little whirlpools. So a team, what psychological safety does is it tends to these little things, because if you start to have issues that aren't being dealt with, there become these little eddy currents, and you start to have all these little places where till the team's not really moving forward with much momentum. And so you want to actually have the conditions so that people can speak up and feel safe to be humans, feel safe to disagree, feel safe to not know. And then you start to have this ability for things to move and us to keep moving on and not have these stuckness, that actually each thing that is stuck, there's essentially like an amount of life force energy that is just stuck there. So there's an amount of engagement that this person could be engaging with moving forward, that's the stuck, and then there's slightly less engagement. And as there's more and more of these things that haven't been tended, a big part of what I do with teams is inviting in these conversation templates. Like, how do we have a conversation about something that's even kind of small that just, there was a little bit of ick that happened and it never got addressed. It's wild what can shift from just addressing these small little hangups and then clarifying, well, what are the shared agreements that we need of the team, or what are the shared agreements of just you and I? Like, maybe you like to communicate via email, but I would rather just have a conversation, and both of us are holding out in our own, and so we're just not dealing with the thing because we don't agree to how to communicate. When we can have that conversation and actually have an agreement, okay, when this comes up again, we're gonna handle it directly. Essentially, you start to take all these eddy currents and all this lost momentum and this loss of engagement, and you start to bring it back to engagement. And it impacts people's lives. Like, when you start sharing these communication frameworks and you start helping people to understand why it's so important that we work together and we clear the air and we find ways to be generative, it impacts people's home lives too. Like, we kind of all need some support to just to be creating that empty space from which we work the best, which is where there's not a bunch of hangups, there's not a bunch of stuff that hasn't been dealt with. And the more we get used to creating that emptiness, then the more space there is for the gushing flow that happens naturally when we have those conditions.
And one thing that we're seeing in organizations is that AI is dramatically increasing the speed of work, but faster isn't always better. Can AI accelerate productivity while simultaneously reducing flow?
I would say that it could if there's not enough clarity. Sometimes more information and more files and more complex frameworks actually takes away from people's ability to do their best work. So with my personal experience with AI, and also what I tend to teach my teams, is to do a lot of pre-work in your thinking and a lot of pre-work in your organizational clarity, and so that we know what AI is supporting us with, and we allow the most amount of simplicity before AI comes in, and it can do all of these things that are, it can do so much work for us. It can be so helpful. But if we haven't fully gotten clear on what we want it to do, I'm sure everyone can has like a memory, a lived experience of this, where you get AI's input just a little too soon, and you're like, doosh, you're hit in the face with this whole bit of information that now you're trying to go through and clarify these things after, but it's just too complex. And so there's all of this wasted energy in trying to navigate this complexity. So doing the pre-work and having your clear set of conditions and having the coherence in the team or with whoever's involved in the project helps us to not end up in this information overload that actually is detracting from our progress.
And what happens when technology outpaces human adaptation? So, technology, which is really, really, really fast, right? Such as AI now, and maybe human adaptation is just not able to quite keep up.
Clarify the question one more time.
Sure. So let's say that we've got a new AI model, new AI tool kind of rolling out every week, which we do, right? There's always something new, always something that's kind of being incorporated, new updates to these models, and how they're getting better and better at doing things. And human adaptation, people in the environment are not able to really keep up. I mean, honestly, I'm challenged to constantly keep up with all the things that are changing, all the new models, all the things that are becoming available. how AI is self-coding itself and, self-improving itself. And what happens when people aren't able to adapt and keep up with that?
Yeah, I think that we end up in that overly complex, overwhelmed state, which doesn't doesn't help us. So again, I think that leading with a lot of pre-work and clarity, I cannot tell you how often this key piece of advice that I give to my clients, to my organizations, and just to friends when someone's asking me like some kind of a complex question that's like, well, should I do this? Should I do this? And there's all of this complexity. I like to say, like, what is your top intention? And to like give someone a moment to take a few breaths and empty their mind out and breathe into their belly and just get simple. Like, what are you trying to do? And a lot of the clarity work that I do comes from, or part of the process is, what's the why, and what's the why underneath the why, and what are you going to benefit from this? What are your clients going to benefit? Like, what is the core piece? Like, everything I do is about the core transformation. And if we get too many adjectives, too many, trying to do too many things, then we end up like, well, there's this, or there's this, or there's this, and we're like spinning around. And so when you take the time to get really simple and clear on that underlying why, and that you actually can land on what it feels like in your body, and there's a true alignment. So it's coming from an embodied truth, which AI cannot give you. That's why we do flow state practices, because we can empty out, we can become coherent here, and then we can choose this clear intention from a clear state. And then we can revisit the same exact question, and without that guidepost of the intention, then it's all these different things. But once you clarify, like, why, now you can say, okay, like, now you can look at all these possibilities and start to focus on what actually matters and take away a lot of the noise, and then say, well, which framework is going to help me with this? You can ask the AI the right questions. Like, we want to be anchored in this, I call it the vertical alignment, like our purpose and our embodied, like materialized potential here on earth, actually building it in the 3D world. When we're living in this vertical alignment, now we can go horizontal in terms of relationships, in terms of this greater thing we're building as a team. And as we create vertical alignment, we want to create that with the team as well. Everyone's working toward the same purpose. And it's really specific, because you can have a single purpose that everyone interprets a little bit differently. So you want to say, like, what are the metrics? Like, what does success look like? We take the time to have that clarity. Now we can have the tools serve us rather than confuse us.
And how can leaders balance efficiency and well-being? So we're getting a lot more efficiency because of all the AI tools, and we can do a lot more. I'm certainly able to do a ton more things, in my day as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, and everything else, working with my team. But how do you balance that with well-being for the organization, for yourself, for your team?
The cool thing about AI is you can ask it questions. You can include your well-being in prompts that you give it. You could have your crazy question and you're pasting in all these things, you're giving it all this information, and say, like, how am I doing? I mean, really, I want you to be asking that question to yourself, but because flow state is what I do, I will include prompts of like, just what do I need right now? And you just start to recognize that your well-being, I mean, that's what comes first, is realizing that how you're doing inside of your own being should come first, not third or fifth, not after you do 1,000 things. Like, you want to start to develop a relationship with how am I doing? And then AI can help you. Like, you can just bring in those prompts like, do I seem frantic? Like, what will help me? What do I need right now? And I really invite people to, as you plan out your day, is there one single touch point that is a walk, that is some kind of a practice, that is literally a one dance? That's something that I'll do, is put on one song. I'll have all these meetings and I just get up and I shake and I go as big as I can. So you start to have AI be on the team as you're giving it prompts, and you just want whatever help that you can get to realize how you're doing, your state of taking care of yourself. It has to be number one for you to be at your greatest capacity. So it's not for just for fun, it's really for what you're creating. And when you can rewire that belief that our society just does not incorporate this. And so if we have to take a stand for ourselves, and then as we do that, then we can have AI help us, and AI will, you could say like, give me a 3-minute exercise that I could do. Give me, you can ask it for these simple things, and it's real smart. It has access to all of that. And you just want to have it be a teammate on the, like, I'm a human and I need to take care of me team.
And one of the things we explore frequently at AIScento is that AI transformation is not just technology transformation, it's a people transformation. From your perspective, how is AI revolution showing up in people's nervous systems? Are they more stressed, more calm, kind of the same?
I think it is do your own adventure, or is that what it's called? Choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
And it really depends on these things that we've been talking about, because if you go too deep into AI without that grounded inner checks to keep checking for alignment, it is going to take you out of your center. And you're going to be like just running after the AI that's 20 steps ahead of you, and that actually is potentially creating a lot more headache and a lot more stress. But if you claim your own creatorship of your life, which you're the only one that can do that, when you're in a high beta brain state, which is like overthinking all the time, you're going to always feel stressed. You're going to always feel at this like deficit, and literally your brain wave makes it feel like you don't have time. Like, when you recognize, actually, I'm the one that takes care of my state of being. I need to create space in my schedule to get into the alpha, more creative state. I need to actually do practices that get me into the theta state where you connect with all of this wisdom. Like, when you realize that that comes first, then you can have AI on the team, and even checking in with AI, having your creative ways that, where you can even clarify, like, in your own relationship with AI, what are your needs, and how can your relationship with AI be something that is calming to your nervous system, that helps you to be in the dominion in your world versus creates this, creates stress. So your choice always comes first, and then invite AI to be your companion. Tell it what your goals are. Help it to hold you accountable, because it will follow your lead.
And what fears are you seeing among leaders and employees? We know, especially, I mean, in many companies, especially in the tech sector, but across companies now, we're seeing a lot of, at least the branding is that AI efficiency. We have less people because we're AI efficiencies, and I'm sure that's probably causing a lot of fears and concerns. What fears are you seeing among leaders and employees as they adapt to this new kind of way of working that incorporates AI?
Well, the top issues that I'm seeing with my organizational leaders now is the information overload, and that's really been increased with AI and just an increased amount of things coming at them. And there's this paralysis I can see where it's impossible to get to the bottom of the to-do list. And how do you prioritize? How do you claim your focus if you're never able to like get to the bottom of your emails, to get to the bottom of all of your team reporting, giving you a huge amount of work that you just don't have time to process? And so the top need that I'm seeing is really inviting AI to it's to come back to the systems and really give a lot of attention to setting up our systems and setting up this protection around us. How many people have access to you? It's all about managing overwhelm and over information. And so I have collaborators that are just genius at building systems, and us working together to say like, what's the system that's going to help you get out of this state, because we actually need you to be like dealing, taking on the higher level questions of your organization. Because if you're in that state and you're always in this beta brain, then you're never going to actually be able to take on the organizational direction, to take on the higher level visioning. And that's crucial. The highest level leader in the organization needs space to do that. And so that is one of the top things that I help leaders to do, is to reclaim like that literal brainwave state where they get to tap into this place of spaciousness, where they get to be a visionary, which is actually the greatest gift that they can give, rather than try to be in this machine-like level of productivity, because that's not. And if they don't, restructure who's talking to them and what burdens are placed on them, then everyone's going to suffer. So we've got to take back our space so that we can truly be creative, especially as the top leaders.
And is AI creating anxiety or excitement or both?
For me, both. Like, is it equal measure? Possibly. But, well, I'll say even more excitement, because I'm an eternal optimist, and I am just here, as we all are, going through a significant expansion process in being able to even use these tools and being able to dream greater, and in processing this overwhelm and shifting it into like, let's have bigger dreams. One of the things I teach is like being a leader who has a vision that is, even some could consider ridiculous, or like being a stand for possibilities that don't yet seem possible, because it's what our planet needs right now. Being able to envision a brighter future and actually spend time in that state. So if we were able to create this possibility, what would you feel? What information can you source when you're actually in that state, in your body, feeling it now? And that's a source of energy. It's a source of creativity. It's a source of finding that pathway. And if we are staying in the overwhelmed state, which many of us are, and we get to be there too, but don't forget to carve out time to be the visionary and to be lit by possibility. And then AI can help you with that too. Like, just recognize that all of life can be aligning to support you, and that your state of being and your vision for the world and your even believing in things that don't seem possible is how we create them. And being, I especially work with visionary leaders who are here to do what hasn't seemed possible. And we need to invest our attention and actually exist in those lit, inspired, deeply connected to meaning spaces, and have AI as our ally so we can spend more time excited than the other side, anxious and overstretched. That gets to be here too because we're all adapting. But just remember that the other inspired state is more generative and it's worth investing in.
Posing a practical question. Suppose you're a consulting firm, a law firm, a financial services company, technology company implementing AI this year. What is the biggest mistake that leaders make during AI adoption?
I think the biggest mistake is not taking enough time to have the conversations and hear everyone's voices. I think it's important to create surveys and have and conversations, interviews, group dialogues. I think it's important to create a lot of ways for people's voices to be heard and for there to be this really clear care that like we're creating this and we really care about what matters to you and we want to this is how we create intelligent systems. This is how we unlock potential is through the ground up, through the bottom up. And if we only have like, oh, let's just take the top leaders and have them make a proposal, like, no, I will tell you, like, that is not the way to set up for success. If you just have a few leaders or like top thought leaders approach this, we need to hear from everyone and we need to emphasize that this is important and that we care. And then we need to actually take this information and have a policy that includes all voices so that we can build something that's intelligent from the get-go. Because I tell you, it might sound like, oh, that's a lot of work. But putting in the work up front will save you boatloads, shiploads of extra time, energy that's going to be drained if you implement a system that then doesn't work very well and people aren't engaging in it in the best way. So invest your time now, get crystal clarity and hear from everyone. And do that in an authentic way where you create multiple ways and iteration to hear from people's voices so that you can source it from the whole.
Okay. What leadership practices become more important in periods of rapid technological change?
The leadership practices that become important are these resilience building practices that include our bodies, that include speaking to the tension, that include making space for people's voices, that include this collective nervous system care. When people burn out, it's expensive. When people quit because the conditions for their employment kind of suck, frankly, that's expensive. When we go too fast and we override the intelligence of the system and people's voices that are speaking to us, that's expensive. And so we want to include wellness, resilience, and creating the conditions that people get to be in their zone of genius. People get to have a lot of clarity. Everyone gets to be a collective voice. I mean, that's something I haven't gone into about part of clarity is creating this democratization of information so that everyone's standing for the same things. Everyone's approaching things from the same set of agreements, and then you can trust people and it doesn't have to constantly be top down or needing to get approval. You empower people with this collective way of navigating. And that increases the intelligence of the system. And that makes people feel valued and part of something and acknowledged. And then you build this collective power that allows us to meet the mission and evolve together and have fun and be humans while we're being this collective of an organization that's creating amazing impact.
Yeah, be human. I think that's a good one. How do leaders build trust while introducing disruptive technologies? A lot of people may be kind of thinking, okay, well, leaders are introducing this, but I don't really know what is the, What is the motive behind it? Can I trust what's happening here? How do leaders build trust while they're, the whole environment's being disrupted by some of the technologies that are being brought in?
Yeah, I think a lot of that trust building comes from transparency. So, for example, I mentioned hearing everyone's input, and especially when it's big sweeping policies that are going to impact everyone, if it comes from the top down and there's no sense of we created this together and there's no understanding of why, that starts to erode trust and it feels like, well, you don't care about me and you don't and I'm going to give you less of my voice because it doesn't seem like you want to know. But if you do surveys, if you constantly tell me that my voice is important, you actually collect the data, you have a town hall, you do whatever your approach is to make space for the wisdom that I have to bring, then you share like this is what we considered in making this policy. So we weren't able to incorporate all of your suggestions, and this is why. This was this thing we actually heard a lot of, but there is this competing factor, and I want you to know that this was a hard decision. When you share transparency that includes people, and we make it this actively this place where we're hearing from everyone and we're sharing why we're doing what we're doing, then that helps us to build trust. And that can take time if you've been doing it in a different way as organizational leaders, but it's possible, and you're going to increase the value. The Trust Factor, it's such an incredible book, actually helps to quantify the increased revenue and the increased profitability that comes from having trust in an organization. And it's worth investing into because it is a competitive edge.
All right, so let's go a little further here. And we often say at iCento that AI should augment people rather than replace them. What does augmentation look like from a leadership perspective? How do we, make sure it's complementing our people?
Well, I could answer that, but because that's your motto, do you want to speak to that first?
Yeah, it's kind of this idea of the human in the loop always being there, right? So we see, people bring in lots of really great AI tools and, they can do all kinds of things, but honestly, a lot of times you get some wild hallucinations. You get, things that don't make any sense when you think about kind of the human aspect and the context that only people really have. And so if we're not checking that, often you end up, people are just like, oh, AI, output this, we're using this. And it doesn't make any sense and it doesn't, align with anything that we're doing, right? So that aspect of the human in the loop, and I think also there's an ethical aspect which we won't go deeply into, but the ethical aspect is that if you think about the idea that, well, AI might optimize for something, but it may not really be in alignment with, the values that we want, right? AI might think, oh, well, the best way to do this is, let's just shut down that division. We're like, wait, that's not what we want to do. We want to, we're trying to do something else here, right? So having that human in the loop and that human, kind of, I guess, the emotional connection, that judgment, that context is that aspect of kind of augmenting, people rather than just, kind of, okay, AI output it, let's do that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Definitely. Like don't just trust the output. Like we need the human to double check everything. And part of it, as I've talked about organizational clarity, what like taking a lot of time, and hopefully larger organizations have this, though I tend to believe that there's more clarity that could come in terms of our mission, our vision, our how, our values, and like what does that mean to actually live the values? Like how do we implement, how does the rubber meet the road, and actually having this inventory to to even give to AI, that whenever you ask it questions that you give it that like this is who we are, this is how we operate, this is what we stand for. And there's a lot of pre-work that through having a high level of clarity that is this consistent thing that's been created from people, from the team. It's been sourced especially from the executive team and what they are here to create, and that they are cohesive and they're not having different team members that are going in different ways, which the way that ripples out throughout the organization is like the more lack of coherence in the executive team, then the bigger like drama you're going to have throughout the entire organization. So it's really from that executive team coherence, from that entire organizational coherence, and actually having it written out, spelled out, having specific examples, making it human, and having this as a guide that you can just give to AI when you have it create something, can do a lot of pre-work to say, okay, AI, we're asking you to create with these values. And then you have to always have someone who's clear on it themselves, who's living these values. It's not just an idea, it's how we operate. And then it's always running through a human filter and not just like trusting AI to make the final call ever.
Let's move to something that's kind of unique in your work now, somatic intelligence. One of the unique aspects of your work is you combine scientific rigor with concepts like somatic intelligence and breath work. For some analytical leaders, those concepts might sound unfamiliar. Can you explain the science behind them?
Yeah. So having some of these flow state practices, and especially, so some of the things that I do like breath work, or I have some deeper practices that I especially guide with the executive team to help them come into this coherence as a team, is I would say composting the past is one of the things that comes through doing these somatic practices. I would say that's a foundational baseline thing. When you have tension, like personal tension in your own body from things that have happened, from traumas, from all of these, like, and things within the team, like, I don't trust this person. This thing happened. Oh my goodness. I think back to, like, this is a ridiculous example, but it actually illustrates this well. I haven't thought of it in years, but when I was a graduate student getting my PhD, one of my top professor advisors, who was a significant influence on me, he would always, whenever this other professor who I was collaborating with in the physics department, whenever that person's name came up, he would like get a little weird. And he would start to just be, I could tell he didn't fully like them, and I didn't know why. And he made me wary of that person. And it was just this ongoing, like, well, you can't really trust them, but they were our collaborator. And there was a moment where he got a little bit tipsy at some mixer event. And I was like, tell me the story, because I just felt this tension. And I thought, maybe this person isn't a great scientist, or maybe they're sketchy. Like, they're sketchy for some reason. You can't trust this physicist professor. And when he told me the story, it was about a dispute over a single student who switched labs from his lab to this other person's lab. And there was bad blood, and he had his feelings hurt. And he had this whole, so he said, oh, you can't trust them because of this. He had this whole thing. And then when I talked to this other professor, they said, oh, well, this student actually made claims that this other, and the professor didn't actually know the claims. This is this whole drama story. And I'm giving the specifics because I cannot tell you how often this happens. And the wild thing is that I ended up going to work for this other professor and it was incredibly prosperous. It was one of the best decisions I could have made. I ended up getting tons of funding, doing this amazing project. Like, there was a startup that came out of our work. And if I would have just trusted this professor and all of their distrust, like, it would have hugely impacted this incredible career path I went on. But really, it was his feelings were hurt. And it never got mended. They never had a repair conversation. And so it's 10 years later. And for years, he's been poo-pooing this professor because of this personal thing. I cannot tell you how often this happens. Well, it happens with us and individuals. Maybe someone on my executive team reminds me of this thing that happened in the past with someone else. Or there was some off interaction that happened between us that forever I was like, oh, I don't really trust them. So do not underestimate the power of composting. And that, I would say, is my superpower. And it's something that I really teach in groups and teach in trainings that I do of other facilitators, is we have to compost and turn toward all these underlying trigger things and recognize that they can be running the show, and we can have all of this unconscious BS that is getting in the way of the flow state, this bursting creativity. And so I actually help leaders to compost at a really profoundly deep level, like heavy things from the past, even from the collective. There's burdens of that are, from sexism, from racism, from all types of isms that are living in our nervous system, and they impact what's possible for us. And when we start to do these practices to clear out, and then we start to access, this is what's amazing. When we can clear out, then all of these somatic practices, we start to get better at being this open flow of creativity so that we can focus, what are we here to create? What do we care about? And now we can actually connect to it and receive it directly and get really clear pathway forward. And we get that clarity in the team as well. Like sometimes I work with individuals that are barely even on speaking terms outside of their roles, and they're on an executive team together. And you know how that influences the team. Like it's toxic. But when I start to work with them individually, then I'll start to bring in mediation and I'll start to clear out the whole team. Now, like we can start to have 10x growth and impact and creating beautiful things in the world because we're opening when we literally these tensions live in our bodies. And then when we can start to access really simple practices, somatic practices like breath work, to get into an altered state, connect to this gushing flow of wisdom and creativity that literally I've had clients be like, where is this coming from? And they're almost weirded out by their own flow of creativity that's not from their mind, and they can tell. They're like, all of a sudden they answered all their own questions because we quiet down the default mode network, which is the inner critic. It's the baggage. We do these practices that actually allow us to connect to direct intelligence, and it's rewiring our nervous system at the same time. And then we start to open up to huge leaps and bounds into creating what we're here for.
You mentioned rewiring the nervous system. What does nervous system regulation actually mean? For those who are not familiar with that.
Yeah. So nervous system regulation is being able to be in a state where we're truly present and our prefrontal cortex, like our symphony conductor of our brain, is available. We are functioning from the now. We are here rather than in some type of a fear response, which can often be invisible. So it can be anxiety. So then our nervous system isn't fully regulated. If we're in some kind of an anxious shutdown, we're in a state of vigilance. We're in a state of worry. We're in a state of survival. The decisions that you make coming from your lizard brain, you could call it like your hind brain, the part of you that's just trying to survive, are very different than the decisions that come from you're open, you're inspired, you're connected to the mission, the vision, you feel it in your body, your heart, you actually feel good. Like the language of the heart is emotions. And so actually more information passes from our heart to our brain than vice versa. And so if your heart is in a state of positive feelings, then you enable a lot of clear thinking, you enable a lot of creativity. If you're in a state of anxiety and you're in a state of shutdown, maybe you, like I was just talking about anxiety, you can also go into a freeze response in which you don't speak up, in which you feel tired, in which you check out unconsciously. Like something comes up in your work and you didn't realize that that's why you needed to go get some popcorn or just check out in any way. All of a sudden you're online shopping. You're like, what? Or a fawn response, which is a nervous system state of being agreeable. So we have these imprints that instead that fawning is an actual, being agreeable isn't a bad thing, but if you're doing it from a place of survival and you have this imprint in your body of, this is how I get by. Like this person wants to do this thing that actually I don't think it's a good idea. And it's a powerful time to presence my perspective. I don't have to be right, but I could just share like, well, from my experience, this is what I've seen. But if I have an imprint of fawning, that is a nervous system response where I just would go into agreeing and just be the most pleasing that I can be. This is really common for women, but it can be common in specific situations for any type of person because that's how we got by. That's, early childhood patterning. And so through recognizing, the great power is just noticing like, oh, that's that thing that I do. And so we start to realize that through doing these rewiring practices, we expand the range of our nervous system so that we can now be in the same situation that used to make us check out, used to make us anxious and be operating from vigilance, used to make us agree. And instead we can make new choices. And it's wild what that opens up in terms of what we're creating when we're creating from choice instead of creating from survival.
And you hinted at it earlier, but why should executives care? So executives listening, like, okay, that sounds interesting, but why, how does it directly impact them?
Well, it comes back to like, how passionate are you about your vision? How big do you want to go? And, I'm really here to work with the leaders who care. Like they have a burning desire within them that maybe it's getting a little bit squelched if they're exhausted and overstretched, but at least they remember what it felt like when they were fully lit to make a change, when they cared what they were doing. And so every single one of these invisible responses is a ceiling. It's a glass ceiling. And we get all these layers of things that are impacting us. We're going into an unconscious survival threat response, and that is absolutely impacting everything we create is coming from that. And when we start to expand our range and we start to be able to get into these, I'm going to say they're blissful, and I don't lead with that because we're here for impact. We're here for creativity, innovation. The people I work with really care about that. But the amazing side effect of doing these practices and getting to these elevated states in which we rewire our nervous system is we start to be able to hold more joy. We start to be able to feel the world we're here to bring. We start to be able to be in a state of gratitude more often, and it expands how much bounty we're willing to receive, how much bounty we're able to create in the world. We literally, and it is the central leaders that set the tone for the whole company. So when the leaders I work with do this deeper work to clear out all of this old interference, you could say, it's the things that get in the way of what we're here to build. And when the teams clear that out in the teams, you lift up everyone. A rising tide raises all boats. So you actually create more fulfillment. Like your impact, anything that you do for yourself is magnified tenfold, 1,000-fold. Like how big is your organization? And so that's why they should care, because this is for this is for this is why they're here. Like, why else are we here? And like, don't you want to feel more joy and fulfillment and like deep meaning in your life? Like, that's why, because when you create that impact, you will feel that, and that impact is going to be expanded when you tend to this brilliant, the most advanced technology, which is what's in your body and your connection to be able to take your inspiration and this higher calling and actually bring it down through your body. Because if you're in a fear response, you can't fully receive it. And so as we rewire, more of us and our soul embodied here on this earth becomes accessible, and life becomes more fun and fulfilling.
And connecting it to a technology, as you just mentioned, as AI handles more analytical and repetitive work, do you think uniquely human capabilities become more valuable?
Yeah, 100%.
Well, let's go over to our rapid fire round now. So I'm going to just give you, you can just say the first word or sentence that comes to mind. And are you ready?
Bring it.
What's one leadership skill that will become dramatically more important over the next 5 years?
The ability to empty out and release all the tension so that we're resilient and functioning at a higher capacity.
What's one leadership practice that is becoming obsolete?
I need help on that one. Being on an island and just being a top-down leader that's just barking orders.
Hmm. What book has influenced your thinking the most?
10x is easier than 2x. And The Energy Codes by Dr. Sue Morter.
Making a note on those. All right. What is one habit that helps you to stay in flow?
Emotional outbursts and like taking time to express and actually get angry and yell. This is one of them, and I bring it up because it's less common and less valued, and it is so powerful, especially with goodness, with fun music, with bringing in life force. Like, you'll shift from the anger and the upset into the pleasure and the delight. It doesn't take long, actually, but you need to express what your upset is first.
What's one thing that organizations misunderstand about high performance?
They mistake this top down and the setting goals and telling people what to do versus creating more of a dialogue and inviting people into their own goal setting and their own input in choosing how they can be high performance.
And what is one prediction you have about the future of work?
We are all going to become more creative and able to regenerate our world as we discover how to interact with AI in a way that supports us rather than overwhelms us. And that's happening.
So, Carly, this has been a fantastic conversation. And we've gone quite a while here, but I really didn't notice how long we went. I think that one of the biggest takeaways, successful AI transformation isn't just about technology. It's about creating environments where people can adapt, trust one another, collaborate effectively, and perform at their best. And technology may accelerate work, but leadership determines whether that acceleration creates a burnout or breakthrough. For those that want to learn more about your work, where can they connect with you?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn, Dr. Carley Corrado of Enliven Leadership. I'm sure you'll put a link there, or my website, enlivenleadership.com, and that is spelled ENLIVEN. AIScento.com. And if you're a leader or on your own project or an organizational leader, I invite you to reach out and book a 15-minute conversation with me if you're intrigued, if you're like, I don't know, like this is a little out of the box, but could this really help me? I invite you to jump in my schedule, have a brief chat, get inspired. The conversations are always uplifting, whether or not we decide to work together. And let's see what's possible for you.
Right. Thank you for joining us for another episode of AIScento Podcast. If you found value in today's conversation, please like, subscribe, share, and leave a review. You can find all of our episodes covering AI, leadership, digital transformation, innovation, and the future of work at AIScento.com. Also on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, and Spotify, and LinkedIn. And until the next time, keep learning, keep innovating, and keep building the future. Thanks, everyone.